There's tons of extra dependency resolution cases like the variadic arguments where you've got, the arguments, you've got a variable number of arguments. So, it also fires a bunch of events when things happen, so you can look into that and you can use tags, which I've also never used. So that's all of the container stuff. Now, how much time have I got?
As much as you want.
As much as I want. Fantastic. Okay, cool.
Yeah, the internet came back, so it's okay.
Oh, the internet went away.
It did.
That's hilarious.
We've got a microwave link and the storm doesn't work well.
That's hilarious.
But it's back.
Welcome back, internet. All right, so I want to show a few quick little practical things for this. So created this controller, home controller, and I've got a service here we're injecting through the constructor. And then we've got our index method, and we're just saying that we want the PDF version of this string hello. Now, if we jump to this service, you'll see that it generates a PDF version of whatever string is passed into it.
So lightweight.
Yeah, it's really lightweight. It's the best PDF generator you'll ever see. So that's pretty cool. So I've also made a very, very primitive front controller and router built into one, also using PHP 8's match statement. So here we're saying for this route here, this this / route, we're going to use this tuple of saying home controller class and this method default null and then.
Sorry, did you say tuple?
Tuple. That's a tuple, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people say tuple.
A tuple. Ah, okay, fair enough.
Tuple sounds more fun.
Go with whatever. So in this case, we're just checking, the $_server variable, which I don't use $_ stuff very often with Laravel, but in this case we've not got Laravel. So we are then pulling out the class and the method from our tuple using whatever syntax is, I can't remember. We're asking our container, we're new up a container, asking our container to make this class, which is going to do our dependency resolution, and then we're just going to call our method on the controller. So if I spin up a web server pointing to our little front controller here, we get a PDF. Sorry for blinding everyone. We get a PDF version of hello.
Nice.
So that shows that working.
It's not white, it's yellow. So.
Oh, because I've got my nighttime mode thingy and it kicks in. I always forget to turn that off. I'm doing talks. So that's an example of the container working. Now you might have seen that you can also on these index methods, you can also dependency inject on those in Laravel. That's not, well, it uses the container under the scenes, but the router itself has to do that whole recursive reflection dance on that method, not just on the constructor. But just know in Laravel that works, and I'm sure most people will probably seen that in Laravel, but effectively that's what it's doing, that recursive, the reflection dance on that. So the cool thing with this though, is if we go to our test, for our home controller test, we can do some mocking. Now this is a little bit verbose, but this is kind of the old school way because we're not using any framework here. But we can create a mock version of our PDF class. We can set some expectations. So say that when the generate method is called, we're going to return a mocked PDF response. We can call swap to say that when it asks for our swap class, we're going to give it this instance we've newed up. And if you remember before our test case, and this is using the container we just built. So this is going to basically pass in this instance to replace anything else that was previously bound. And then we're going to use the, I didn't kind of build in, like Laravel has, this JSON or this get and all that sort of stuff. I didn't want to build in all of that. So I'm just going to new up the container and ask it to make our home controller and call the index method, get the response and assert that it equals mocked PDF response. And that one works. So that's pretty cool. Now I also wanted to really quickly talk about facades because facades tie into the service container really, really well. So I've got another version down here. This one here is skipped because it requires a few changes to the controller. So we go to our home controller. An alternative of dependency injection is to use facades. Some people hate them, but they kind of do a very similar thing behind the scenes. So in this case, instead of injecting one in there, we would call our generate method statically on there. And instead of using the class directly, we'll use our little facades thing. I don't want to risk blinding you all, but just squint real quick and let's see if this works. PDF version of hello using the facade. So behind the scenes, it's the same PDF class, And if we look at our facade class, this has one method on it, which is the get facade accessor. And this is what you return a string from. Now in Laravel, you'll see some of these return a literal string like mailer. Other ones return a class name. But whatever we return here is basically what the container is going to be passed to the container. This is what we're going to ask the container to make for us. So we have a real quick look at the base class of what a facade is. There's a call static method. So basically, the facade just proxies everything we call on it statically. It proxies to the underlying class. And that's why you can call things on it statically when they're not actually static methods. And behind the scenes, doing this little dance, but effectively facades, I'm pretty sure facades are always singletons because when they get resolved, it stores it on there. So that's kind of the main part of how facades work. And then this extra method is should receive. So when you've used a facade in a test, you might say mail should receive. Actually, mail's not a good example because you've got mail fake. But if you've got a facade, you call such and such a should receive this. All of a sudden, that tells the facade, don't use the real container thing anymore, swap it with a mocked version of myself. And it does this little dance to basically ask the container for the real version of it. And then it swaps that out for a mocked version of the thing that the container resolved. And so every subsequent call to the facade will now pass it through the mocked version instead because we've replaced the resolved instance with our mocked version of that. So that's how facades work. And in our test, home controller test, so we can mock via the facade. So here we're saying that this facade should receive generate and return our mocked PDF response. And we're doing the same thing before where we're just getting the container and asking it to call the index method on the home controller. And that one should, oh, hang on, I've got to save it to get rid of the mock test skip. That one works. So we're mocking via the facade instead of via the container directly. So that's my talk. I think that's everything.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, oh yeah, questions, sure, go, ask questions.
Firstly, great talk, well executed. Secondly, do you know off the top of your head, does the container actually create new instances each time? If it's like, even if something's not explicitly set as a singleton, like I would think that there'd be like some like efficiency point that you'd basically be like, just reuse the same thing again because we've already newed it and resolved dependencies and done all that.
I'm almost certain that if it's not specified to be a singleton, it will give you a new one each time. Because I mean, there could be like consequences of not doing that. Like you might expect to get a new instance each time. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure, like the container I've built, like to give you a, so I go to code, Laravel, not Laravel shift, C code, Laravel. Framework, container. So our build method. So you can see it's doing very similar stuff to what we went in the talk, but it's got all these extra things for other fancy stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that it doesn't ever store that. I mean, the make method is actually probably the one we want to look at. Which calls make, which I think calls resolve, and it's a bit crazy.
Aliases, events.
Yeah, this is all like the stuff that makes it like even more noisy than it is, and this is the stuff that makes it overwhelming as well when you try and like source dive it.
Yeah. So
that's kind of the point of the talk, is to show you like the most important things that you probably use every day or could use every day. But yeah, I
think these days the reflection API is pretty fast, but I feel like earlier,
that's a fair point.
Kind of slow. There may have been some like something about it.
Yeah,
I feel like I've used containers in the past where like it's like the comment was if you need it to be a singleton, then annotate it as a singleton or whatever in your container to make sure it's singleton. Otherwise, it may be.
It may be. Yeah.
So this is like an efficiency thing because how it resolves and different stuff goes on. So
yeah,
makes sense.
And some classes or services have some kind of caching you want to reuse, but then PHP is a cold start kind of thing, right? Is Laravel still like that, or
Still,
it's like?
I mean, it depends if you've got like old cache and all that sort of stuff. So like,
I've come from just regular, basic PHP, and every time you hit Apache or Nginx, it cold starts it and builds everything.
yeah.
Still like that with Laravel?
With Laravel, yeah. I mean, there's things that do get cached, like you can cache your routes, you can cache your views.
Right.
That's built into the framework, but any caching of like classes and that, you've got to rely on something like opcache to do.
It's not sitting there running like Ruby or Java.
No.
Okay, so again, like you're not saving much because it's all sort of building at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah, but it's still like if you've got like a reasonably generic service that's used across like, I don't know, 10 other services as well, that they all have dependencies injected into them, that you're not creating 10 of them, you're creating one of them just reusing.
I would always assume like the best default would be that it is a singleton, just give them the same object each time unless you need it to be a fresh instance. But
Otherwise, that's pretty easy to shoot yourself in the foot if you totally don't realise that.
That all sounds like a user problem. Yeah, a lot of these injected services are pretty much immutable kind of functional style. Give me a thing and I'll give you a thing, rather than I'll build a whole big data structure internally.
Yeah, give power tools till trouble and they'll still help themselves.
Okay.
Give power tools till trouble and they'll still help themselves. So.
Give power tools to 4-year-olds.
Yeah, still that's how you use it. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
Just wondering, is a container able to solve the circular dependency issue?
So which circular? Oh, if it's like needs itself.
Classes and in others constructed.
I've never tried.
A needs B, B needs A.
Yeah.
I think, pretty sure the Symfony one has a mechanism for it, but I feel like it's not magic, so you have to do something to help it.
In Spring and Java it does. Oh, it's not
That's a dance or something. So you can only nest it your dependencies with like 5 layers or something. Just more than 5 layers, then there's going to be an exception.
What, so if there's 5 dependencies apart?
Yeah, because if it's a good dependency, of course, it's going to be more than 5.
You just, I mean, just actually think about that when you write the container, you keep an array of what you've got, so what you did so far.
Any other questions?
Abstraction hasn't blown my mind since 2005 when I started trying to make my way from PHP 4 to PHP 5, but I thought I had a head around until now. Thank you for blowing my mind once again.
You're welcome, Rob.
Yeah, I haven't seen reflection in a while. It's like,
No, it's one of those tools, like even like debug backtrace, all those things that like, unless you're building a framework or like some kind of lower level package, if you're using it in like a regular app, like in a controller or something, you're probably doing something wrong and it should probably be a package.
You're the toddler with the power tool.
Yeah. But it's still good to know those things exist and how they're working so that when something goes wrong, you understand, how it's doing. Like the stuff with the conditional resolving, like when this controller asks for this thing, that's using debug backtrace to like go back and see, who actually tried to, like who called container make on me? Oh, that was this thing. Okay, that one's been told that it needs this one, but this other one, I don't know. To me, I can't think of a good use case for conditional binding. I'm sure they exist, but I strive for simplicity in my application code. So
the way I've seen it being used is you have your controllers and your controller methods. Like if you might have like 5 actions in your one controller, so then some actions need different dependencies than other ones. And for some reason, you don't want to inject them all into your main class. You just want to have them injected into your actions.
It's more like when you want to do like a different instance though, right? Like it's when this one asks for the mailer, give it this one. When this other one asks for the mailer, give it a different one.
Like
I think that's
like your job might take like one that posts directly, but then the
that's probably a good
web
use case
controller
actually.
might push directly onto a queue that gets set off later or something.
Yeah, that's not a bad use case for it. I mean, there's
probably
different ways of solving the problem, but that's one way.
That's like exactly. There's probably like 3 other ways to skip that. So
Yeah. Cool.
thank you.
One last
Question, yeah.
Your editor.
Oh, it's Vim.
Yeah.
I'm getting into Vim and I'm like, I've got all the name.
Yeah.
This is cute.
It's It's the second time I've seen this talk, and I said exactly the same thing when I first saw it. I'm like, this is like Vim on steroids. You know?
I'm really worried because like my fingers don't cooperate when I've got people watching me.
Nobody
Like,
can
I'm
touch
making all
sites
these
when
mistakes,
people are
I'm
watching.
giving them a bad name.
No.
No one can tell, it all looks like magic.
It's hard to install the plugins and like you see someone on YouTube with a plugin that you want and like go install it and it won't work.
If you need Vim help, there's actually a Vim support group on Discord I can give you a link to where we all hang out. All the the PHP, Laravel, Vimmers all hang out.
Because you can't get us.
Yeah, we don't know how to get out of it.
Holy cues.
Awesome.
Awesome. What happens now?
Nathan.
Are we going straight to the next one?
Yeah.
Can I go grab a beer real quick?
Yeah, go for it. Go ahead.
Somebody needs to turn the light on.
Oh, yeah. Nathan.
I don't know how to turn it on. I don't know how to turn it on.
Press 3. Press 3.
Ah. Oh, that's very bright. Can I expand down?
Yeah.
Press 2.
No, you have to press 3 and then press the arrow down button.
Why is the camera? Oh, you just hand around. Having a scroll.
Okay.
You know what? I did it because I can. Going in for the sexy close-up.
Can we get the?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I have to do some things and some stuff. And just give me 2 seconds. I'll make this all work really well. There was a slight outage due to stormage, but I'll back online.
Is there a storm outside?
There was an exception